Good evening, Council. Welcome to 2022, our first regular meeting for the year, and we look forward to tonight's meeting. We'll start tonight with a moment of reflection before we get into the approval of the agendas, and then we'll go from there. So tonight we're going to start with a moment of reflection first. All right, thank you very much. All right, tonight, next order of business is the approval of the agendas. We have a consent agenda. Is anyone prepared to make a motion of approval for the consent agenda? Councillor Monteith makes that motion. Call the question, all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And our regular meeting agenda, I've heard of no requests for additions or modifications. Is there any questions on the agenda? Otherwise, a motion to approve as presented.
Oh, sorry, Mayor Fader. I have an addition in camera land, section 16 under VoIP. If we could add that to the end of the meeting, please.
Very well. Motion to approve with the addition. So moved. All right, so we will call that to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, tonight now we'll start with next order of business for the good of council. Does anyone have something they would wish to share with the whole council? It's been a lot of holidays in the last little while, so I think everyone's getting back into the groove. It's obviously great to see everyone back. Christy Edwards, you have?
I just wanted to welcome all the students back to in-class. My kids haven't quite made it there yet, but hopefully everybody's happy to be back in school and that we can get back into the rhythm. WA Day is doing their annual fundraiser, so it's good to see the community kind of getting back into some of their regular routine and doing some of our regular every year annual things. So hopefully everybody can support that and help WA Day to get some money to work on their playground and a couple other things they're working for. So it's hopefully the community will support that.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else have some comments for the good of council? Events, things that are going on, things you'd like to highlight? Councillor Edwards.
Sorry, I thought of one other thing which I thought was awesome was the alumni tournament at the high school happened over the holidays, and it was really great to be able to go and watch and realize how old we are getting. Because yeah, I didn't play, just to make that clear, but it was really fun to see, you know, classmates and people that we went to high school with and stuff, and for the high school to allow that to happen and to have that community members put that together, and so it's a great opportunity for us to celebrate our community.
Very good. Any others? Oh, Councillor Edwards, go ahead. All right, so that being done, we will move on now to our public hearings for tonight, of which we have three. There's Bylaw 1945, 1946, and 1947. So the plan tonight is that we'll introduce each of those separately. We'll call for a motion to open the public hearing for bylaw, for the said bylaw. After which, if anyone's wishing to speak for or against, we would request that you come to the podium, state your name, and also if you are for or against the motion, and then your explanation for or against. Before that, we'll have our planner, Gavin Scott, introduce each of the bylaws just to make sure we're clear on which bylaw we're talking about. And then once everyone's had an opportunity to speak for or against, if they so wish, then we will close the public hearing. And later on in the meeting, under consideration of the public hearings that we just had, council will go through the same bylaws one by one, just to make sure and then have some questions for administration and Gavin as well before council decides on second and third readings. So tonight we are going to open with Bylaw 1945, and I'll entertain a motion from council to open the public hearing for Bylaw 1945, and then we'll ask first Gavin Scott to introduce the bylaw. Anyone prepared to? Okay, Councillor Van Hagenbos makes a motion to open the public hearing for Bylaw 1945. Call it to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right, Gavin Scott, would you please introduce us to Bylaw 1945?
Before I do so, Mr. Mayor, I believe I will give a general introduction to the rezoning process and the consideration of council tonight for all three. And this is just a general overview of your duties. And from that, I'm addressing what is listed in the Land Use Bylaw, Administration Section 6, Subsection 5. In reviewing an application to amend a bylaw, council shall give consideration to the following: the consistency of the proposal to the town's statutory and non-statutory plans, approvals, policies, and this bylaw. And in that, council may ask staff questions of whether or not there is consistency amongst your planning documents, and I will provide some overview to that end. Item B, the proposal is located in an appropriate area of the community and is compatible with the adjacent land uses. Item C, the proposal does not comprise or compromise the road capacity of the area, the levels of service of the roads in the area, or vehicular and non-vehicular traffic safety, and is suitably and efficiently serviced by an off-site road network. Item D, the proposal can be adequately serviced with municipal utilities, including water and sewer. And finally, that council may ask of staff that any other plan, scheme, concept that needs to be addressed be brought forward by staff. So any other matter deemed necessary by council. And in that, you could find that you're lacking information and request that information to come back, and that would likely be a requirement for a second public hearing regarding the matter. Now, in the generalities of adopting a bylaw, if you do not move forward with second and third tonight, you have up to 2 years to do so. The bylaw would die after 2 years. So even though second and third is on the agenda tonight, you can put those off and you can move forward at your leisure. In addressing Bylaw 1945, it is regarding Lot 3, Block 19, Plan 2-111-554. And this request is to rezone from public to commercial general. It is in a location at an intersection where commercial is the predominant land use surrounding all of this, or located next to this proposal. Within that, the applicant has requested that what they wish to do with the property is more in alignment with this commercial zoning rather than the public zoning in which certain uses were not listed. Now, from the point of view of what council needs to consider, it is strictly what are the uses listed in the commercial general district, and those were provided in the package. So they're part of your package tonight. And you should review each of those uses and ensure that from those uses, you're okay with this location having those uses, any of those uses potentially occurring at that location. Now, uses are listed in two ways. They are listed both as permitted and discretionary. Permitted means that the person has the right to build those without a lot of interruption in moving those applications forward. And then there's the discretionary side of things where certain conditions can be applied to make the development better. And for 1945, I'll turn that back to, I should say that this was duly advertised after first reading in the paper 2 consecutive weeks. Thanks.
Thank you, Gavin Scott. And being this is a public hearing for Bylaw 1945, I will now open it to the floor if anyone is wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1945. I will make sure we have time for anyone. So second ask, is anyone wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1945? And I'll ask a third time, is anyone here wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1945, a land use bylaw amendment from public institutional to commercial general? Seeing none, I will request a motion from Council to close public hearing for Bylaw 1945. Councillor Wolstenholme makes the motion. Call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay. Next on the agenda is public hearing for Bylaw 1946. This is a land use amendment from public institutional to commercial neighborhood. And I will request a motion from council to open the public hearing for Bylaw 1946. Councillor Henniger makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. I will ask our planner, Gavin Scott, to introduce this bylaw to us.
Bylaw 1946 is in regard to Lot 1 and a portion of Lot 2 of Block 374, Plan 92B. The request being for it to go from public to commercial neighborhood. This is a former church, and the church, much like we did on, I believe, 2nd and 19th, this is very similar to that, where the church is on the corner. All the surrounding land uses are residential. And the request of the landowner is to move to commercial neighborhood. Neighborhood commercial contains a subset of land uses, both on the permitted and discretionary side, suitable to neighborhood conditions. As such, this was moved forward at first reading on December 13th and was duly advertised 2 consecutive weeks in the newspaper. We had no written responses, but I do believe that there was an email today and perhaps a request to speak from somebody in the audience. So.
Okay, very good. So being this is a public hearing, again, I will request anyone wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1946. If you would kindly come to the mic and state your name and whether you're for or against, then you can speak for or against the bylaw. Okay. Once again, I'll ask, is anyone wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1946? And again, if anyone's wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1946, a rezoning from public institutional to commercial neighborhood. Seeing there is none, I will request a motion from council to close the public hearing for Bylaw 1946. Councillor Edwards makes the motion. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. All right. Next on the agenda is Bylaw 1947. And it's a land use bylaw amendment from residential to residential multi-unit. I will request a motion from council to go to public hearing on Bylaw 1947. Councillor Dressler makes the motion. Call it to question. Any all in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And to our planner, Gavin Scott, would you please introduce Bylaw 1947 to us?
Bylaw 1947 is before you tonight for a request to rezone from residential R1 to residential RMU, which is multi-unit. The parcel is the west half of 4 and all of Lot 5 within Block 418, Plan 92B. With the request, some of the background that's been provided has been where I'll go with this is the background is going to be presented in 2 parts. One is, what does the MDP, the Municipal Development Plan for the municipality, say about residential development? And from the MDP, I'll read certain excerpts just to give you the flavor of what is in that section of the document. So this is from Part 4, Section 6, Residential Development. The objectives of this residential development for the municipality is to ensure a diversity of housing types and service lots are available throughout the community and cater to all residents and housing needs. The second objective is to ensure that an adequate amount of serviced residential land is available to meet future housing demand, and that land is developed in an efficient manner. The policies, 6.1, all future residential development shall comply with the objectives of this plan, should be directed to areas of the municipality identified in map 2 and indicated in the policies of section 5 of this part as suitable for residential development. Item C, council shall evaluate the suitability of each proposed development or subdivision. Section 6.2, residential development programs and decisions should ensure a choice of new residential neighborhoods within the provision for different housing types to cater to all housing needs and income levels of the public. Item B, safe, attractive residential environment secure from incompatible uses and in conformity with this existing historic, natural, and cultural quality of the residential neighborhood. So you're to ensure that. And C, you're to ensure rational and economic extensions of existing municipal services. Section 6.3, council should strive to achieve a proportionate increase in various multi-unit housing that caters to the broad socioeconomic and demographic groups. Applications 6.4, applications submitted for large-scale or multi-lot residential development shall be evaluated on the basis as to how the proposal will affect the existing municipal infrastructure and servicing. Residential development may be planned and developed in phases, and which should be taken into consideration. 6.5, the town should regularly monitor the vacancy rate and volume of building permits so that short-term needs for serviced residential can be further anticipated and subsequently addressed. 6.6, the town shall undertake an infill strategy that identifies opportunities for developing new residences within existing built-up areas of the community. And the last of the section 6.7, the town shall attempt to increase local awareness of historic preservation grants available to residents. Now from that you can gather there's a few things that are involved in this application moving forward, that the request does include this idea of infill. It does include that you should be considering the idea of adding a diversity in your housing stock, as well as a choice of how it fits into the neighborhood. Now, from the letters that have been received and from the citizens that will speak tonight, I believe that there is a theme going on here, and that this property is not without certain aspects that need to be noted. The property's street does stand above the lot, and there is a substantial grade differentiation from the street down into the lot. So many people have stairways down to their house. The alley is at grade, and that's where the servicing for the sewer does locate itself, and is in the back of these properties. And most of the buildings are down on the flat at the back of these lots, where it does flatten out away from the main street that it fronts. Now, as such, there is a grade differentiation going up the alley. It does periodically see water get stand in there just because of the grade differentiation, and those questions can be directed to Public Works. Adrian would be happy to answer questions about how this property drains. Now, beyond the topographical issues that you have here, you also have the idea that there is some historic buildings within the proximity of this proposal. A historic building in itself does not necessarily preclude a development next door, but sensitivity of the type of building that is built is something that is to be considered. Now, from that, there's a lot of what is written in a lot of the letters having to do with development things. So when I talk about historic building fitting in next to this, multi-unit fitting in next to historic, a lot of that, as well as curb, gutter, sidewalk, how the alley drains, all of these things are quite often to be left on the wayside of this discussion because the primary focus is whether or not this land use is ideal at this location. Now, throughout town, we did do a little bit of a forensic audit across it and looked at where in this municipality has multi-unit dwellings popped up. Predominantly, they have occurred and the zonings have been granted on locations of corners of properties within blocks. There was one north of the park next to the former school/hospital that was done mid-block, but because you had a public and institutional use next door, that infill block or lot rezoning was set because it seemed that there was no residences to the west of that. And there were no complaints from the adjoining neighbors as to what would go on here. Now, further to this is that within the multi-unit district, you'll find that there is a big gap. So from the current zoning, there is up to 2 units can be had in the current zoning. Once we move to residential multi-unit, that's where things begin to change. And that under permitted uses, you have up to 4 units. So that would be the maximum the developer could achieve if they were successful in getting the zoning tonight. They could achieve without any further pushback from the neighbors. The discretionary uses, though, come with a circulation process, and that circulation process, should the zoning go through, for any number of units above 4, would give the citizenry another shot at what should this thing be? How many units should it be? What should the building look like? Is there adequate parking? How's the access? How's the drainage? All of these questions are asked at that level. What you have to be comfortable with tonight in the public hearing and what you hear from the public is that the listed uses are what you would consider right for this location. And as such, that is your primary objective, to determine whether or not this is the right location for this development. I do know that from first reading it was indicated that this is to be a 12-unit development. I don't believe it is. The developer can say whatever he wants coming in the door as far as the number of units that he believes he can get on the property. But until the development authority, which is the MPC in this case, processes the permit, it is not clear that 12 units is even feasible on this property, let alone something that could be lived with by the neighbors. So you have to look at the proposed 12 units as if it was not the primary factor. The primary factor is the district and what the district allows. The secondary is the location. Location does matter. This location is mid-block. That matters. So as you listen to the citizenry tonight, I believe that you should take that into consideration, listen to their points, be able to parse off what is development criteria, what is rezoning criteria. And so I did give you a lead into this process as to location being primary. But part of that is that you're also not the development authority. So don't get into the weeds in discussing whether or not the person can get the parking on the property or necessarily get the number of units that they're asking for. If you get into the weeds on that, you might be setting yourselves up for acting as the development authority, which you are not. You're a higher level body, and you're to determine whether or not the proposal is appropriate. And I'll leave my thoughts there. This was also passed first reading in December and duly advertised twice in the newspaper.
Thank you, Gavin Scott. That is appreciated. So this is a public hearing and for Bylaw 1947. And we would request anyone wishing to speak for or against this bylaw that they would kindly come to the mic, state their name, and for or against, and be able to present to council their arguments for or against this bylaw. Well, yeah, the mic is here ready for anyone that would like to. Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Stacy. I am the Housing Liaison Worker here in Fort Macleod. And so I'm speaking on behalf of the Housing Committee here. Fort Macleod and the Housing Committee have conducted extensive research over the last 10 years and have identified gaps in all the continuums, from emergency shelters to social housing to affordable and market rentals and home ownership. Feasible steps towards accomplishing the goals set out by the Fort Macleod Affordable Housing Strategy are to increase discussion on housing, grow and support partnerships with nonprofits and developers, stimulate diverse housing, support existing housing, and dedicate land. This land rezoning and potential for more housing in town is an essential action and a great step forward in providing more housing options for families and individuals. 115 houses in Fort Macleod have been identified as in core housing need. 65 are unaffordable, 10 are unsuitable or overcrowded, 25 are inadequate or in need of major repairs, and 15 suffer 2 or more of these listed criteria with no other alternatives. Since I started on November 15th, I love this small town, I have observed a maximum of 3 listings available at any time. Sometimes there are none. These 3 listings might include a bedroom, which isn't suitable for most. For families, a 3 or 4 bedroom dwelling might not be affordable, especially when utilities are not included. In some, options are minimal. Additionally, when potential or current employees of local organizations phone housing, such as myself, seeking a place to live, often there is nothing available. It is unaffordable or it does not fit their needs. I've actually had to tell people to look elsewhere. This prevents them from being able to live and work here, prohibiting the growth of Fort Macleod's economy. In 2019, a research study done by the town of Esquimalt, BC, multifamily housing was found to bring forward numerous benefits. Multifamily units bring more support for local businesses, more housing choices, and increased social connectedness and well-being. Once our basic needs of housing, food, and safety are met, the next most important thing is a sense of social connection, which impacts our mental and physical health. When we get to know our neighbors by name and feel comfortable stopping and chatting, that increases the feelings of safety. Social connection lowers anxiety and depression. It builds community and volunteering. Social connection also increases productivity in the workplace, increases resilience, and people are more likely to eat and sleep better. This has potential benefits for the community as a whole. In Fort Macleod, we have 78.4% of housing 78% of housing here comprises of single-family homes. Most families, singles or seniors here, cannot afford single-family homes to rent or own. Fort Macleod is in dire need of more diverse housing options, and the rezoning of this land for multi-unit dwellings could have a significant positive impact for Macleod citizens' well-being and the economy. Thank you.
Anyone else that would like to speak for or against Bylaw 1947? And just to ensure, if you can, state your name for or against the bylaw, and then specific also to the location that's in question as well.
Hi, Council. My name is Shaylee Newman. I'm against it very much. I am to the west, directly beside that lot. I've lived in my house now for 6 years. I've renovated by myself for the last 6 years to increase the value of the house. So you can probably understand that when I hear a 12-unit complex is going up next door, I'm not very happy. In fact, it made me sick. And you know, I can stand here and I can go through a list of the reasons why I don't think it's a good idea, why I'm against it, but frankly, I think that should be common sense. As it was mentioned, it's mid-block, it's not in a corner, it's surrounded by single dwellings that are, my house is 1950. You know, those houses are old. They don't need to be towered by a 16-unit or 12-unit complex. It's just not an appropriate area. It's, you know, our street, we have issues with parking already because our main driveways are the alley or street front or, you know, in your yard if need be. And you want to come in and, you know, add 12 units, well, now you got sewage backup. It's an old area. Are we going to redo the whole area? Sewage? Again, I don't feel the need to list all of the reasons why. I just truly think that this is the most inappropriate area. And while I do agree that we need more multi-family or more, what do you want to call it, multi-unit housing, that's not the right area. There's an empty lot that has been for sale on 23rd Street for years now with a little old house or building or whatever is on it. Why not there? You know, why not over by Napa? Why not somewhere that is actually suitable for a multiplex that doesn't affect neighbors that have lived there and put their heart and soul into that neighborhood? That's just where I'm going to leave it. It's inappropriate. To me, it's completely ignorant, and it's not about money. This is about people's homes and pride and joy. And I'm not going to have that ruined by greed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other one wishing to speak for or against Bylaw 1947?
Sophia David, and I am against. May I say at the outset that this process has given the appearance of a rush to change a policy, written or unwritten, that has in the past allowed multi-unit buildings only in transitional areas between commercial and residential areas. We received our notice of a proposed rezoning on December 20th and were required to let council know if we wanted to make a presentation at this meeting or include anything in the council package by January 3rd, a stat holiday, all over a holiday period. Yes, this is strictly in accord with the Municipal Government Act, but the impression is of an attempt to slide an unpopular measure through without giving any time for opposition to be expressed. This is only strengthened when Adrian Pedro, Director of Operations, is quoted in the Gazette saying that a proposal for a 12-unit building has already gone through planning, and there appear to be no concerns. Kelly Sanford told me that rezoning is only the first step in development. In this case, it sounds like the last. The letter we received also did not specify the size of the proposed development. If there had not been an article in the Gazette, neither I nor my neighbours would have known this was a proposed 12-unit building, with the possibility of it being even bigger. I live across from the proposed rezoning and development. At present, it is a block of single-family dwellings and surrounded by similar residential blocks. It is a quiet neighbourhood with everyone from children to seniors residing there, and it is the residential location that made us buy our home. We know our neighbours, and both ours and the other neighbourhood children have played and do play basketball and hockey on the street. With this development and resulting increase in traffic, this would no longer be safe. The existing residential purpose description reads, "The purpose of this land use district is to provide for a high-quality residential environment with an appropriate range of housing types that are primarily single detached dwellings with the potential for 2-unit dwellings where appropriate. This describes our neighbourhood as it exists." I spent my Christmas holidays combing through town bylaws and the Municipal Government Act. I think it is extremely important to note that although there are guidelines for building heights, setbacks, scale, massing, form, etc., according to our bylaws, these guidelines can all be overruled at the discretion of the Development Authority, which may include the MPC, Development Officer, or the Council itself. And, as previously mentioned in the Gazette, planning has already looked at this development and do not have any concerns. Mr. Pedro did not specify who planning is. This seems to make this meeting our only opportunity to express our concerns. In Bylaw 1882, under the multi-unit guidelines, these are my concerns and where I perceive conflicts between the proposed development and the existing bylaw. Both section 11.2 and 11.3 read, "The number of units shall be based on the density of existing development on the street and must blend in with the lower density residential dwellings as I mentioned, single-family dwellings at present. Additionally, the size must be based on the adequacy of utilities to accommodate the proposed development. I admit I don't know the adequacy of our area's water and sewer utilities, but there has not been any work on the area's utilities in at least 42 years. I highly doubt that the old cast iron sewer pipes serving our house are sufficient to service a 12 or more unit building. Section 6.2.5 regarding character reads, all development shall complement and enhance features of the adjacent lots and the overall existing or desired character of the street and area. Section 19.2 regarding parking requires that there would need to be between 12 and 24 parking stalls on the lot to accommodate the proposed development. This does not account for any spillover onto the street for units requiring extra parking. At this point, our block doesn't even have a sidewalk on the north side of the street. Section 11.6 also requires that parking must be on the back or side of any building, which means the unpaved alley containing the sewer line and storm drains will have at least double the traffic it presently does. Section 16.2 covers pollution control. I suspect the warming up of up to 24 cars in the winter, or any time of year, would create significant carbon monoxide fumes for the neighbors around them, particularly since the houses on the north side of the street are in a valley below the road. I understandably did not find any mention of garbage collection and where the 24 plus garbage and recycling bins would be stored and picked up. Can I continue? Thank you.
Yeah, you have another minute or two.
Thank you. According to the town website, there are 29 development properties for sale by the town alone, all of which are on the edge or in transition of residential areas. Surely these would be far more appropriate for this type of development. In the 2016 census, 16% of, or 184 dwellings in Fort Macleod were unoccupied, followed by an 18-year population low in 2019. Do we really need a 12-plus unit apartment building at all, never mind in the building middle of a residential area? In conclusion, it is my understanding from the bylaws that the proposed development could not be allowed without changing Bylaw 1882 itself or contravening it. It is also my understanding from the bylaws that if rezoning is approved, there is potentially no limit to the number of units in the development. Could the proposed 12-unit building end up as a 16-unit or even more? While this would have to go through the development authority, approval is at their discretion. And Mr. Pedro has already said a 12-unit has gone through planning and they see no problem with it. Even so, there have been occasions in the past where council has overruled the MPC. Our position remains that where we would approve of a duplex building on this site, which is allowed under the existing zoning, anything larger would destroy the character of the neighborhood, go against the intent of the existing bylaw 1882, and quite possibly cause problems in the other areas I have outlined. Thank you for your patience and the opportunity to speak, and I have copies of my letter for all of you. I didn't get it in time, so it wasn't in your package. Thank you.
Thank you, Sophia. Curious if administration would like to comment on what was stated in the newspaper at this time, just for clarification. If not, that's fine. I don't believe that was what was said exactly. I think the intent is that administration reviewed the application and the recommendation was to be in favor. It wasn't necessarily in favor of the actual development, which comes at a later stage. So I just wanted to clarify that. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this Bylaw 1947?
Hello, my name is Barry Loyce, and I'm speaking on behalf of BDB Developments. So I'm the gentleman that owns the property there, myself and a couple other people. Just a little bit of my background. I've been in the Fort Macleod area my whole life, and been in the rental property business for 10 plus years, and rent to many different people. And place to live. You know, 12th Street is really booming, and there's lots, you know, and as well as some other businesses outside, and it's plumb very difficult for people to find a place to move. And no, I'm not a greedy developer. At the end of the day, I want to provide quality housing for people in this community. You know, at the end of the day, I'm in business. I need to make a little bit of money, but it's not like I'm here to, I want to see the community do better at the end of the day is really what I want to do. We've applied for this. I do have some preliminary drawings of what it potentially could look like. You know, other than that, and I don't have, you know, much else to say. I appreciate that it's going to change the face of the neighborhood, no doubt about that. As far as the location, there's not many other locations at Fort Macleod for this particular kind of thing. Like there is the one on the one-way, but parking, you know, coming off of the one-way to park right in front of your building is problematic to back out onto the one-way to get access, you know, to continue down the one-way sort of thing. So with this particular elevation change on that property, it makes it very conducive to have walk-in units on the alley level as well as having walk-in units at the street level. So I would just thank you for your time, and if you have any further questions or you would like to look at these, you're more than welcome to.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barry. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this bylaw 1947?
I am Denzel Connor. I live on the west end of 22nd. I'm against it. For the reason is our back alley is too small. It's too narrow. The main street of 22nd is too narrow. Most of the time, if you coming down that street, somebody has to move over and stop so somebody can go by. As for a sidewalk, I've been there since '94, and I was told there will never be a sidewalk along there because they don't know what to do with it. And if you look at your maps and all that stuff, it can't be done because the houses are set a certain way. It's, as a multi-unit, it should be put someplace where they belong, as a corner lot, or someplace with a larger alleyway and street. We have got, I understand our garbage is going to be picked up in the alley. That's congested. I have had a town vehicle come out of my yard. I driving it, I got hit coming from the west. It's a blind corner on the west end. My building and the people on the west or the north side, it's a blind corner. You got to really watch when you come out of there. Between myself and my neighbor, we took the fence out between the two of us at the back of the alley because she got hit twice or three times coming out of her garage. So we took it down so that it give her a little better view and me a little better view of what's coming or going. We still have problems. And as far as I'm concerned, there's got to be some better places than put it on that street. On-street parking, there isn't enough room. And then if you start getting on setbacks and all that stuff, it does not work out.
Okay.
Somebody could get hurt, especially coming out the west end or even the east end. There's trees along the area that you can't see past. It's just not the place for a multiplex. There's better places for it than there. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Denzel. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1947?
My name is Alyssa Ross, and I have a letter here from my neighbor, Tyler Brown. He unfortunately couldn't make it tonight, but he's in 436 on 22nd Street, just across from where they want to put the multiplex. And it reads, my vote regarding the new development plan on 22nd Street, and he's voted no. It's signed and dated today, January 10th.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1947? That's fine, you can hold it if you
Okay.
want. You can
Thank
walk
you.
around that way.
Good evening. My name is Rachel Vanny, and I'm a resident on 22nd Street across from the proposed rezoning. And I'm voting a no today. I'm going to keep it simple. As a professional, I understand the community's desperate need for diversified housing. That's the thing that made me pause when we got the letter. And then I learned that there's a proposal for a 12-unit building, and it's just simply not feasible on the street. I think there's been a lot of things listed, but it comes down to the safety and well-being of all of the residents on the street. And really, when I consider it, for anybody who would live in a 12-unit there, I think it would impact their safety and well-being as well. Thank you.
All right, anyone else wishing to speak for or against this bylaw? I did want to mention to council, if council is of the opinion that they would like to have a continuance of this public hearing, then we can have a motion for that to allow more feedback, input, and questions for administration. If we close the public hearing, then we need to vote on the bylaw at some point. Without receiving any additional information for regarding the rezoning bylaw. So that's before us today, and so keep that in mind, council, as we're coming to the close of our public hearing. If you would like to see more time to ask questions, get feedback, get more input, then a continuance is the way. If we'd like to close the public hearing and then vote on the bylaw, then that's council's decision as well. So anyone else wishing to speak for or against bylaw 1947? I know these, it's never an easy discussion. It's a change, but we would encourage anyone that has concerns or would like to speak in favor to please do so at this time. Okay. So right now, then, I believe we'll ask motion for council's opinion on whether you would like to look for continuance or to close the public hearing for this bylaw. Does anyone have some comments on that? Councillor Wolstenholme?
I don't believe I need to continue.
Okay. Okay. Anyone else? No? So if council is good with the information they've had and would like to close the public hearing, then I will request a motion to proceed with closing the public hearing for bylaw 1947.
Mayor Fader, may I just pause for just one moment? I would just like to read into the record that there was a couple of letters that were submitted to council prior to, one from resident Sharon Randall and one from Barbara Gracebach, who live in the area as well, both opposing. There's several issues in those ones as well that are brought forward by them for their opposition to the zoning. And I just wanted to make sure that council considers those as they go through the process.
And those were emailed, correct? Both of them?
Correct, and they were provided as part of council package because they were submitted prior to the deadline.
Okay. I don't recall seeing them in the package. That's why I was wondering, but maybe it was. Yeah, okay. Oh, under letters separate. Okay. Okay. All right, so if there's no one wishing to further to speak for or against bylaw 1947, I'll call, the motion's been made. Or sorry, you made the motion, correct? To close the public hearing for bylaw 1947. We'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Okay, so now we are going to consider all the public hearings we just had, and we'll start in the same order that we did the public hearings for. So under section H, consideration of public hearings, bylaw 1945, We have passed first reading, it's been advertised, so now it's a request for council for a motion for second reading. Councillor Dressler makes that motion. So the motion is on the floor. Is there any further questions for administration? Clarification or any details? Councillor Monteith?
Where does the increase in car count come into effect? Who approves that? Is it MPC? And is Department of Transportation involved in this?
Car traffic, you said?
Yeah, like that's gonna make that intersection a lot busier, so I'm just wondering where that gets taken care of.
I believe
So-
that would be in the development process.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, if I could. At the time we did the subdivision, this was circulated to Alberta Transportation, who had no issues regarding access to the property. And there will be a requirement for a roadside development permit once the development comes forward, and they will review it as to their needs.
Thank you, Gavin. Any further questions? Discussion? Debate? Seeing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And request for third reading for Bylaw 1945. Councillor Edwards makes that motion. Any further questions or discussion? No debate. Call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Right, we will move on to Bylaw 1946, a land use bylaw amendment from public institutional to commercial neighborhood. We've had first reading and it's been duly advertised. We've had a public hearing. Is anyone prepared to make a motion for second reading? Councillor Wolstenholme makes the motion. Motion is on the floor. Any questions for administration? Any discussion, debate? Seeing none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. And a request for third reading for the same bylaw. Councillor Henniger makes the motion. Any further discussion, questions, debates? Seeing none, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. And lastly, Bylaw 1947, Land Use Bylaw Amendment from residential to residential multi-unit. We've passed first reading. It's been duly advertised. Public hearing has just been held. Is anyone, can I request a motion from council for second reading of Bylaw 1947? Okay. No one's, okay. Councillor Edwards makes the motion for second reading. All right, and now is the opportunity for council to ask of any administration any questions. Does administration, council have any questions for administration on the details of this land use bylaw amendment? Councillor Edwards.
I was just wondering if Gavin can clarify what is the current maximum allowable with the zoning that it has right now as far as dwellings? Is it just 2?
It is 2 as a discretionary use.
Okay, so even the 2 would have to go to MPC?
That's correct.
Okay. If I may continue, if that's okay. I just have a really hard time with this because, like Rachel said, it's really hard because our community is in such dire need of housing, and it's an opportunity here to help to alleviate some of that pressure in our community. However, you can't ignore the neighborhood that has come together to express your concern about the possibility of that type of development there. I guess my philosophical question is, if not there, then where? Where do we invite these individuals who need housing to be in our community? Are we going to continually shuffle them to the outskirts and to the outsides of our communities, or are we going to welcome them into our neighborhoods and help them to become part of our community and to be a part of Fort Macleod? And so I just have such a hard time because I know that we can do it as a community. I know that we can have these developments happen, and it can benefit not just the people who are looking for housing, but it can benefit our community as a whole in adding these individuals into our community. And so to say no to a development is really hard when there's an opportunity and somebody who's willing to actually build something. It's really hard to say no to that when for the last 4.5 years, council has been asked and asked again on how do we help the housing crisis? How do we help move our community forward? How do we keep our people who want to work here, who want to raise their families here, and allow them to do that when there's no housing available? So it's a wrestle, it's a real struggle, and I'm still on the fence. So I'm waiting to see what other council members have to see if there's some enlightenment from someone else, because it's really hard.
Did you have any other questions for clarification on the proposed amendment?
I wondered if Mr. Loist could clarify what the actual count was. I know that this has nothing to do with zoning. Yes, it is 12 that is the proposed development. Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was correct.
Okay. Councillor Dressler?
So I did read over the letters that we received and the concerns in regards to height for firefighting, the nature of the neighborhood, parking, street access, our land use bylaw, and zoning for multi-purpose. We have several buildings within our community that are way over height capacity when you really want to think about it, when you look at a 12-story building, and depending on however it be, we have one right along River Drive. So, using that as a thing for firefighting, our fire department is quite capable of dealing with a building of this size or nature. Parking and everything else like that, again, that is part of the agreement when Gavin, and Kelly, when they do that, they actually tell them where they actually are supposed to make room for parking. So this is not extra vehicles being parked along on the street. It'd be just like any other residential home having a garage. The street is not ours. The street is the town's. So that technically we're supposed to be parking our vehicles in our own driveway, not on the road. So, again, these are certain things that I get really frustrated when people turn around and misuse or misguide when they say certain information. So, and I know that the aspect of dealing with veterans and dealing with other individuals and our housing community, finding places for individuals and getting somewhere to live within the community. This is what we're supposed to be. It's supposed to be a community of being belonging, but yet we seem to be forcing everybody out of the community. I had 3 veterans that were trying to find a home here in Fort Macleod. Unfortunately, I had to get them somewhere at home different. So one is in Vegreville, the other one I went up to Edmonton, and they were from this community and this area. What a shame. I feel the shame to bring somebody after being for 14, 15 years of service for this country, and they lived in this community, and they can't even live here because they can't afford it. So that's enough said for me.
Any other questions for administration? Councillor Wilson?
I'd like to commend the businessmen who want to build this. The town very much needs it. However, I also know how I'd feel if it was going up next to me. So that's all I have to say.
I did have a question, and part of my concern is just the proximity. And when I've been thinking about multi-unit throughout the town of Fort Macleod, over 3 or 4 units, they've all been on a corner lot on the highway, mostly. And I would appreciate some comments on that from administration. But in all my thinking, and I would appreciate some feedback from administration. Maybe we could start with that on where they've seen multi-unit mid-block in a residential neighborhood.
So I do believe there are 2 8-units in the middle of a block, 19th Street and 4th Avenue, I do believe. Just behind the day home, the Sunshine Day home there.
That's on 6th Avenue.
Yeah, so there's 2 8-unit pieces that are mid-block.
Yeah, they're cornered on the avenue and the street, adjacent to a public institution. The 2 8-plexes?
Yeah, they're not on corner lots.
Technically they are because the parking lot used to be 19th Street.
No, because there's an alley and then there's 2 other units. So the day home on one side and then a home on the other. So technically on the avenue there, mid-block.
Do you know of any others that are mid-block with residential on either side on a street, similar to this application?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Any other questions? And then I think when Gavin was going through it, there was a lot of discussion about sensitivity and fitting into a neighborhood. I was wondering if the administration could comment on how that sensitivity and fitting into a neighborhood would work with a multi-unit development mid-street.
Can I just clarify, are you asking for the aesthetics and how that would play into fitting in with the neighborhood, or what your specific question is on the sensitivity around that? Because I think that would be more along the development phase and them deciding on what would be appropriate for the area at that point.
Fair enough, but it also is I think there was comments in the municipal development plan about transition from where multi-unit is. Like when I drive in Lethbridge, when you enter a neighborhood, typically the multi-unit housing is at the beginning of the subdivision, and behind that is often the residential. There's very specific efforts focused on making sure multi-units congregated. You don't have a block in Lethbridge where you're driving down the street and all of a sudden you got a 24-unit apartment and then a whole bunch of houses again. It's really good access off main thoroughfares where the multi-units are easily accessible without hindering neighborhoods. So I guess that's what I'm reading into what planning is, land use bylaw planning, to ensure that we're not putting developments where it's going to have negative impact on neighborhoods, whether it's commercial, whether it's industrial, whether it's residential. So I'm just wondering if administration has reviewed that thought to ensure this application fits with that general idea of trying to be sensitive to the neighborhoods.
It's hard not to answer that question without getting into development. Now, I will say that your vision of Lethbridge is one of new development. In the context of the downtown, you will find 12-unit walk-ups, 4-story, just down from Top's Pizza. There is a plan for London Road to continue to add multi-unit development in the London Road area, taking out Victorians. So Lethbridge isn't quite a good example, I think, from the point of view of a small town at Fort Macleod. Given that, the land use bylaw has many mechanisms whereby the proposal can be altered to the liking of the Municipal Planning Commission to suit the neighborhood. Hiding density, making the building fit as far as its character. The building put forward by the applicant, I don't think meets character. It would have to be worked on to the point where it did fit into the community a better. So there's a lot to be done, I think, whether the applicant has other ideas. But again, we're getting into the weeds on development. But as far as fit, there's a lot that can be done.
If I may, another question, alleyways within the town of Fort Macleod, like when someone is relying on alleys for primary parking, for I'm just wondering, what is the limitation, is, if any, within our land use bylaw currently with regards to the use of back alleys? Because that's been a big question tonight.
So, I mean, again, this is it's a bit of a tough one because it's walking that fine line. So it really depends on when we actually get that application. Then we can actually assess, okay, what that impact is on the adjacent infrastructure, both from the street side, both from the alley side. So it's really hard to say at this point. I wouldn't disagree that perhaps that alley sees more use than the typical alley in the town. But is that something to say that we couldn't add more use to that? You can say at this point without seeing an application. That would be a consideration.
And along the same lines, regarding actual servicing, like when does the town say, no, we can't handle that development density in this area based on the current infrastructure? Is that a land zoning question, or is that a development stage? Like, I'd hate to see us go down this road and then the developer finds out there's no servicing capacity for said infrastructure.
So again, that's strictly a development question. No different than any other developer proposing anything else in town. If there are upgrades required, then they would be looked at that time. Okay. So that wouldn't be considered at this point. Okay. And again, that would be based on densities that are being proposed.
Okay. Any other questions? Councilor Nagos?
Not really a question. It's a tough one for sure. There's a couple different sides to this, and I sympathize with all parties. We all know there's a severe need for housing in this community. We have housing that is in the downtown. Parking is an issue, but parking is mitigated. There's a lot of walk-in housing, or walk-up, whatever you want to call that, like they have out by London Road and stuff. Seniors who use public transit or our senior shuttle, etc. So it comes back, without going into the development details, the last couple questions were regarding that. It goes back to, is it a fit for this this neighborhood? The neighborhood, it's a residential neighborhood, and I think we've gone into too many of the details on what it could be. The development authority, the MPC would work with look at everything to make sure it's a fit, etc. But being that we are actually talking about a 12-plex at this point, it's pretty tough to ignore that. Usually rezoning happens and then the development gets discussed after the fact. I think we kind of put the cart before the horse on this one. But with that being said, I think it's pretty tough to ignore what this could be for the area. It has to be a proper fit. Parking is of concern. I know the area extensively, and I wouldn't want to be in that position. So that's where I stand on this.
All right, Councillor Henniger.
Initially as well, when I ran to join council, that was a big thing for me, was housing. I sit on a few boards that discuss housing almost monthly, and outside of council I work with people, and I'm currently trying to find housing for 4 families. So I understand I too ask myself, would I want it right next door to myself in a newer subdivision of Fort Macleod? I do know on 28th Street there's a 2-unit dwelling that is on a corner. So when I look at the housing, I do understand that it's hard to see it as a 12-unit dwelling. If it was a 4-unit dwelling, a 6-unit dwelling, I think I would be looking at it in a different scope. So I want to speak tonight and just thank for everybody coming forward on both ends, and as well as administration. This is very difficult. And I think we need to look at housing as the fact that, especially in Fort Macleod, it's not individuals coming in looking for low income. It could be your family that you work beside at work. So Thank you for the developer coming today, because it's been a lot of opposition, but I just thank you for taking the opportunity to even look at development within Fort Macleod.
All right. Any further debate, discussion, Councillor Monteith?
I think when we look at this type of thing, we need a lot of education because there's been a lot of things said today that were not correct. We are making a decision on rezoning. We're not making a decision on development. Development goes to MPC and they approve or they don't approve. So town administration doesn't decide what we do. Town council doesn't decide. They decide on rezoning and it goes to MPC. And I think people need to understand that and understand the process that these things go through. We can't make a decision on anything without knowing what people think. So of course we have to pass the motion because maybe everyone's in favor of it. And if we make that decision, we're not doing what the people want. So that's why it gets first reading and that's why it goes to public hearing. And then we have to decide. The decision here is we can change the zoning to multi-unit, and that doesn't mean this project goes ahead. So, but what we're left with is something that's zoned multi-unit. So that's the question. The question isn't whether there's enough parking, there's too much traffic or anything else. The question is, do we want that multi-unit? And that's what we're deciding tonight. So we can't get ahead of ourselves. There's a process, and no one's trying to ram anything through here, but there's a process to go through, and then we make our decisions. Thank you.
Councillor Venaguas?
Thank you, Councillor Monteith. That's exactly what I wanted to say earlier. No. With that being said, I've seen some of the social media, and you try not to get involved in that, but there's been certain animosity right from the get-go. And that's the part that I didn't understand, and I think it goes back to the education. Like Councillor Monteith said, we are rezoning, and it could have been for a 3-unit property that could have brought up the assessment on the whole neighborhood, and it might have added 2 or 3 vehicles to the neighborhood. So if council were to approve this, it doesn't mean there's an approval for any kind of development. That's not what we're deciding here. And I felt that some of the feedback we were getting was that this was a done deal. And Mr. Pedro, I know he never said that in our last public meeting of the year. It could have been that they reviewed it and seen no concerns at that point. It didn't go through the development process. The process is multi-tiered, and it could at times, is there updates needed? Sure. We were always looking for positive feedback on the development process, but this did not go through the development process. This was a simple rezoning request, and I think Councillor Monteith explained the difference between that and a development approval. Thank you.
Okay. Does council want to have any further debates, speaking for or against the motion? We get some indications, but do you want to sell your side at all? So Bylaw 1947 is before us. The motion is on the floor for second reading. Correct? Did someone make a motion? Yeah. So it's up to council now. If there's no further discussion, if there's any debate on the motion. Councillor Venaguas.
So, excuse me. So based on the public feedback, I, as an elected councillor, cannot shy away from that. This is their neighborhood, and I feel I have to take that into consideration above the fact that housing is, there's a shortage, it's non-existent in this community, but I do have to take in the public portion of this, and I think it's become very clear that the neighborhood is not looking for this unit at this time. So for that reason, I will be not in favor of this rezoning.
Any other? Councilor Dressler?
You know, when I hear this and I hear about housing and developers looking to develop land in our community, and we keep on going back and forth because of our land use bylaw. You know, a developer comes to this community, wants to invest in this community, finds a location that would be a prime location that in his or her or other eye is a choice that they put their money forward to redevelop a land, whether you know, it was an older facility or home or whatever. These developers coming to our community are bringing people into the community, not just what I read on social media. And I think that's very absurd when I see some of the stuff. Just because of the way certain things have developed in our community doesn't mean that we're bringing in these kind of individuals. So as somebody there that likes to see some more housing in here, I would be in favor.
Anyone else wishing? Councilor Edwards?
I would also be voting in favor of the motion to move forward. And I am going to trust in the development process that our MPC and our administration will be able to work with a willing developer, that they would hopefully scale back and that things would be put to an allowable existence within that neighborhood. I feel the opportunity for more housing is needed, and there isn't a lot of suitable locations, and a lot and a half doesn't come up every day. And so I feel like the possibility of building here and allowing additional individuals to join our community is worth taking a chance and allowing the process of development to take place. And I believe that we can make it work.
Very well. Anyone else wishing to discuss, debate? Like overall, I agree with comments made. It's a hard decision. You'd like to see development. We appreciate the developers. We appreciate the citizens in our community. The challenge I have is it is a very, it's a street with residential homes, and I struggle with the thought of a multi-unit mid-street, and for that reason I'm inclined to vote against. I believe there's a lot of opportunity in our community to work with developers. Like I've been driving through Lethbridge, I think there's opportunity for larger apartments in our community, and I think they would get filled up a lot quicker than we would know. And so I'm inclined to vote against this point and encourage some consideration and more work with the developer on this process as well. Any other discussion, debate? Seeing no more comments or discussion, second reading motion is on the floor. We will call it the question. All in favor? Those opposed? 4 against and 3 in favor. So the motion and the bylaw has been defeated at this point. Okay. All right, so that concludes the consideration of our public hearings that we had tonight, and we will move on now to unfinished or new business, of which we have 2. An Acp Grant Application, and we'll ask our Director of Operations, Agent Pedro, to speak to this.
Thank you, Council. You have before you a resolution
We'll take a quick moment. Hmm?
Yeah, well.
All right, carrying on to new business. Our first item on our new business is the ACP Grant Application. We'll ask our Director of Operations, Adrian Pedro, to speak to this.
So fairly straightforward. Administratively, we've applied for an ACP grant for regional stormwater management. We are applying for this grant in conjunction with the MD of Willow Creek. Should we secure this funding, we would be able to do an entire stormwater plan for the south area of town, which has been a huge issue for us. And then they would also cover within the MD as well. So hopefully figuring that out. We're asking for a council resolution in support of this application. That's one of the requirements for the application. So we are seeking that tonight. The nice thing about this grant is that should it get approved, it's fully funded. So there's no matching contribution from the town's perspective.
Sounds pretty straightforward. Anyone prepared to make a motion? Councillor Dressler?
So moved.
As per the recommendation.
Correct.
Any discussion or questions? Seeing none. Oh, you have a question, sorry? Councillor Dressler?
Yes, to our Director of Operations. Can you, when you're doing that there with that south area, would that also include what we wanted to do with the storm ponding under the highway before its potential, so that if that highway realignment is done, that we have somewhere to put that water?
You hit the nail on the head. So it would encompass that as well as some other things downstream. So
wonderful. Love it. Thank you.
All right, very good. So motion's on the floor. If there's no other discussion or questions, we'll call it the question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. On to item 2, which is some policies, number 31, 32, and 34, and our Director of Finance, Chris Holbeck, would like to speak to these.
Good evening, Council. Tonight on Council's agenda are 4 operational policies. They are here for Council just as information. They are approved by the CAO and not Council. 2 of these policies were required through the management letter in our 2020 audit. That is the corporate credit card policy and the EFT policy. We were required to get those done. So I'm just going to go through, just do a quick overview of the 4 policies that are on the docket tonight. The corporate credit card policy, it just puts some parameters around the use of the town's 2 credit cards. It talks about ineligible purchases on the town's credit cards and the security of the card that is available for use by staff, which is the card under my control. The second policy is electronic funds transfer policy. It just puts together some parameters on who is paid by EFT by the town of Fort Macleod, and that is payroll and suppliers. The third policy is ensuring small tools equipment policy, and that's just putting some parameters around the dollar value of items and how we insure those items. And the fourth one is the loyalty program policy. Currently, the town has some loyalty cards with certain suppliers such as Staples. We have an Air Miles card. and a Napa loyalty card. So we just wanted to put some parameters around these types of programs, and that the benefit of those programs, it's administered by myself as Director of Finance, and any benefits that come from those programs come directly to the town of Fort Macleod and not an individual. So those were just for council's information tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thought you were going to say it all went directly to you. Any questions on any of the policies? Comments?
I just thought there was going to be a bonus for being loyal to the town of Fort Macleod. When I first read that, that's what I thought we were going to be talking about.
We can use
wasn't
air
quite
miles
that.
when we pay our property taxes. Okay. All right, a motion to accept as information these 4 policies. Councillor Van Hagenbos makes that motion. Any further discussion? Seeing none, call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. And on to committee reports. I believe there's a few attachments. One with Oris Kshunagarch and UCF. I'm just trying to remember. Willow Creek Foundation, yes. Anyone wishing to speak to any of the committee reports? I know it's probably been slow the last month, so not a lot of committees meeting, but if anyone wishes to speak to any of the reports, then please do so now. Seeing none, then we will request a motion from council for to go in camera for one, I believe it was land item. Councillor Edwards makes that motion. Call to question. All in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, and have a good evening.